Governor Tim Walz, he's in even hotter water now that it's believed that over $9 billion worth of fraud has occurred in the state of Minnesota. Of course, that barely holds a candle to the stratospheric level of fraud out of California, but that's a discussion for another day. So I got this from Nick Sordor. It's from December the 19th, and I'm going to be going through an extensive amount of videos and posts and articles, etc., with regard to this revelation that blew up over the last couple days. So it says, just in, House Oversight Committee Chair Rep. James Comer is threatening to subpoena Tim Walz if he refuses to cooperate with the committee's investigation into Somali fraud. If Walz ignores the subpoena, he must be arrested. No more breaks. And I would agree to that because it's all happening on his watch. There's just too much fraud happening in a relatively small population of people relative to the overall population of Minnesota. And there's no way he isn't aware of all this fraud happening. But on the other hand, just look at him. Tim Walz, he's incompetent. He's retired, but not retired, the word that rhymes with retired. Almost said it. So anyway, let's give this a watch.
Tells Fox that he is prepared to subpoena Governor Walz to come in and testify before the House Oversight Committee if Walz doesn't cooperate with their investigation, Brett.
Bill, sometimes these things take time. What's the next step here?
So you heard Congressman Comer talk about wanting to get those bank records. He said specifically
drag his ass into Congress for starters.
Suspicious activity reports. He wants to try to track what, if any, money was sent from Minnesota back to Somalia, who was sending it, who got it, how much of it was taxpayer dollars.
All right, we'll follow it. Bill, thank you.
All of it.
The suspect in the...
As for
of course, all of it. All of it was taxpayer dollars. I'm completely positive that it was all taxpayer dollars. Of course it was, whether if it's federal level or state level, regardless, it's the taxpayers' money that went to terrorist organizations under Tim Walz's watch. On his watch. So this comes from NW Rain Judy from 10 hours ago. So this is from today. Industrial scale fraud in Minnesota. When will Tim Walz pay the price for allowing all of this?
FBI agents carried out boxes of files from Ultimate Home Health Services in Bloomington Thursday morning. The state suspended its license this month after discovering alleged fraud in its Integrated Community Supports Program, or ICS.
The FBI is cracking down.
The door is broken there.
They broke the door down.
Prosecutors say Minnesota's entire Medicaid program seems broken.
What we see in Minnesota is not.
Now, how fucked up is that they had to break the door down to get access to serve a fucking warrant? Because they obviously served a search warrant because they carried out all those boxes. So they had a search warrant. So a government office in Minnesota effectively barricaded the door to prevent the FBI from going in there, to the point where they had to bust the door in to get what they were there to serve the warrant, to get freaking files for all this rampant fraud happening. I mean, that kind of speaks volumes.
A handful of bad actors committing crimes. It's a staggering industrial scale fraud.
Prosecutors charged 6 people with fraud Thursday, but none yet in ICS. They say Minnesota did a bad job of creating guardrails, so the state became a target for fraud, even by people from out of state. For the first time, they charged 2 men accused of fraud tourism, coming from Philadelphia, setting up shell businesses, then billing Minnesota from back home. In all, the state has declared 14 programs as high risk, and those programs have cost $18 billion since 2018. So how much of that is fraud?
I was going to say, so is it going to be close to $18 billion? Are they taking $9 billion as it's maybe just the safer number to go with at this time? Maybe it is 18. Maybe it's significantly higher, like in California. Who knows?
$18 billion question. The answer is far too much.
So far, prosecutors have proved about $350 million in fraud, but they say that's just the tip of the iceberg. First Assistant U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson said a significant portion of the $18 billion could be fraudulent.
When I say a significant amount, I'm talking on the order of half or more, but we'll see. When I look at the claims data and the providers, I see more red flags than I see legitimate providers.
Important to note, they say there is no evidence that any of the people they've charged with fraud have been radicalized, and no money has gone to any terrorist organizations.
Yeah, okay, sure, whatever, dude. Yeah, of course, we're going to believe that. So we might as well just start saying $18 billion. Fuck $9 billion. They fraudulently took $18 billion in all likelihood. Okay, Gunther Eagleman, back on December the 20th, and this is a post from Donald J. Trump. $9 billion was stolen from the state of Minnesota by illegal Somalian criminals. They must pay a big price now. President Donald J. Trump. And this is from the 5, same day. The Somali fraud is billions bigger than we first thought. Jesse P. Waters tears into tampon Tim Walz and the Democrats for never taking responsibility for their messes, which of course they don't. This is who Kamala chose to be second in line to the presidency, and the quote goes on, so we'll just play it.
It happened
Let's hear
under
from him.
his watch, and so he's going to fix it? Usually that's not how it works. So the fraud started in 2018. He started as governor in 2018. And $9 billion is gone.
Interesting?
It's gone. It's gone. And so his budget's $66 billion, and $9 billion went poof, and he didn't notice.
Incompetent.
That's like more than 10% of your budget.
Face of retiredation.
And he had no idea. And this is who Kamala chose to be the second in line for the presidency. She's an idiot. He's an idiot. And the fact that he's blaming Trump.
Yeah, dude, let that sink in. Kamala Harris is bad enough. Imagine listening to Kamala Harris speaking to the American people on a daily basis. Oh, my God, dude, talk about wanting to rip your hair out. But Tim Walz being the vice president of the United States. Holy shit,
tells you
man.
Everything you need to know about the Democratic Party. It's never their fault when people steal our money. It's your fault for finding out. And not only did they steal it and use it to live like a quiet lifestyle, they bought bling. They bought Porsches.
Oh, yeah, houses,
wired it to
vacation
Mogadishu.
Properties
Maybe it
in Africa,
up in the
by the way.
Pocket. We don't know. That'll be investigated. One guy spent $150,000 on crypto and then just flew to Amsterdam and disappeared. This is so disgusting, and it shows such a lack of respect for the hardworking men and women of this country who look at their paychecks.
They don't give a
paychecks
freaking shit about
anyway,
the American people.
And then the stuff we do give to the government is just gone. So what do we get? We get nothing. We just get debt.
Exactly. Well, they're like, $38 trillion in debt, 40 trillion, 100 trillion. Who gives a shit? It's all just, just magic numbers on a freaking ticker. Okay, Tom Emmer from 13 hours ago. The media cover-up in Minnesota is a scandal in and of itself. An estimated $9 billion was stolen from taxpayers under Tim Walz's failed leadership, but the blame also falls on the Minnesota Star-Tribune for failing to hold Walz accountable. And this comes from foxnews.com. As soon as I can get it open. And then we'll look through this a little bit. Media complicity blamed as feds say Minnesota fraud crisis could reach $9 billion, shown their true colors. Federal prosecutors said last week the fraud in Minnesota could be as high as $9 billion. No, I'm hearing $18 billion. That's what I'm hearing. So Walz blames Trump for Somali fraud. Actually, I believe I already have this clip somewhere else. It's 6 minutes. It's a bit long, but I think I already have that clip somewhere, a shorter Cliff Notes version of it. Minnesota's sprawling fraud crisis has garnered national headlines in recent weeks, but several critics say the problem festered for years, aided by local media that appeared uninterested in holding people in power accountable. Yeah, of course not, because they're working with them. In newsrooms, they're told we can't run that because we're going to be accused of being racist. Town hall columnist Dustin Grage recently told Fox about news outlets in Minnesota essentially enabling the fraud by not calling out shocking taxpayer waste occurring primarily within the local Somali community. Either that or the editors were getting a taste of it. That's probably what was really happening. The outlet that is considered by many the top news source in the region, the Minnesota Star-Tribune, has faced criticism on social media in recent days over some of its headlines, including Minnesota Somali community grapples with fraud cases while pushing back against stereotypes. On November 26th, and Trump claims Minnesota lost billions to fraud. The evidence to date isn't even close. On December the 11th. On Thursday, federal prosecutors held a press conference where they revealed that the true scope of the fraud scandal could end up costing taxpayers around $9 billion, prompting some conservatives on social media to point out the December 11th headline. So let me see if they actually have a video of this or if it's just another article. My guess is that it's probably just going to be an article, but they might have this press conference here. If this loads, it appears that they do. Let's see what this is all about. Let's hear what they have to say.
The fraud problem in Minnesota, and I've always believed that if you speak the truth in a plain-spoken way, people can handle it. Minnesotans and taxpayers deserve to know the truth of the fraud. The fraud is not small. It isn't isolated. The magnitude cannot be overstated. What we see in Minnesota is not a handful of bad actors committing crimes. It's a staggering industrial-scale fraud. It's swamping Minnesota and calling into question everything we know about our state. I spoke in the fall about the iceberg I saw ahead. Something's fraud that's much larger than what's been visible to the public. When I said that, it wasn't hyperbole or rhetoric, it was a warning. And today I want to talk and I want to show here a sense of what that iceberg looks like, because I think people deserve to know what that is. and how big this problem is,
Okay.
because we can't
I think
solve
we're
the
good.
problem until we grapple with the size of it. So the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services pulled the claims data for these 14 programs dating back to 2018. And those 14 programs in Minnesota have cost $18 billion since 2018.
Which happens to be the same year that Tim Walz became governor. That is just so interesting to me.
More than $3.5 billion in 2024 alone. So that's a sense of the magnitude of the problem. These are the 14 Medicaid programs, which is just a part of Medicaid, these waivered services that have been flagged as having issues with program integrity and fraud. Now, I'm sure everyone is wondering how much of this $18 billion was fraud. It's not the $1 million question, that's the $18 billion question. The answer is far too much, and the task ahead of all of us is not only figuring out how much of that money was fraud, because we know a significant amount was, but figuring out how to put an end to the fraud in our state and get control of it. So let me end with this before I take questions. The magnitude of the fraud in Minnesota cannot be overstated. It's staggering amounts of money that have been lost. But it's not just about the money that's been stolen and wasted. This is a problem that's caused all of us to question what kind of state we live in. I think it's eroded our sense of collective statewide self-esteem and confidence.
Yeah, it's a hellhole.
It's caused we have a state, as I've said before, that has long taken pride.
Thousands of millions of dollars.
Economy, good schools, beautiful
crazy.
lakes, mini parks, and a sense of community spirit and civic mindedness.
You think anybody's going to jail over this?
Really calls into question all of that.
I'll believe it when I see it.
I know that it's been allowed to go on far too long, and we need to do whatever we can to stop it in its tracks.
Even under the Trump administration, I'm not even confident that anybody's going to go to jail over this. Okay, so that's the end of the video.
Significant portion.
Yeah, it is. Okay. All right. So that's that, and I'll move on to try to read the rest of this. So the Minnesota Star-Tribune masquerades as a newspaper. New York Post columnist Miranda Devine posted on X. It's actually a Democrat front hiding news, twisting facts, lying outright, one of the worst in the country. Additionally, the paper's CEO is Steve Grove, who served as Governor Tim Walz, former Commissioner of Employment and Economic Development, which has sparked criticism from some who say that the paper is hesitant to pin Walz to the fraud crisis. Well, like I said, dude probably got a cut of some of this fraudulent money. Would not surprise me. Anyway, Fox News Digital spoke to several locals who argued that media outlets either didn't cover the scandal thoroughly or cover it thoroughly enough, or in cases where it was covered, Walz's oversight role was downplayed. The Minnesota Star-Tribune has proven itself to be nothing more than communist fish wrap, Republican House Majority Whip Tom Emmer, who represents Minnesota's 6th congressional district, told Fox News. Quote, they've shown their true colors throughout their sorry coverage of the massive fraud in my home state. Fraudsters stole over $1 billion from taxpayers on Tim Walz's and State Attorney General Keith Ellison's watch. However, the blame also falls on the largest, most widely read newspaper in the state for failing to hold Minnesota's so-called leaders accountable as decent journalism requires. Their bias stinks to high heaven, but that's not surprising given that their top dog is a former Tim Walz appointee. And last week, the conservative media watchdog Newsbusters reported that even after the scandal broke into the national spotlight, major news broadcast networks were still downplaying the fraud issue and focusing more on President Donald Trump's rhetoric on the matter. Grage told Fox News Digital that the news landscape has shifted over the last decade or so from a point where the news was covered fairly in an era of governors like independent Jesse Ventura and Republican Tim Pawlenty into complicit media that carries water for Democrats. That's happening all over the country. I mean, generally, that's probably been going on for well over a decade at this point. Quote, conservatives in these newsrooms, they have told me that they try to push stories, but a lot of the time they bump into roadblocks with their newsrooms, Grage told Fox. Grage painted a general picture of newsrooms in Minnesota filled with staffers sympathetic to the DFL, Minnesota's Democrat Party apparatus, and said a key problem is the fear of being labeled racist in their coverage of fraud in the Somali community. In regards specifically to the Somali fraud scandal, newsrooms will come back at them and say, well, we can't run that because we're going to be accused of being racist. So what? Just allow them to just steal as much money in the form of fraud as they want because, you don't want to be a racist, so they can take an infinite amount of money from Minnesota taxpayers, I guess. And at the end of the day, that's where a lot of this has stemmed from, Grage told Fox. I mean, we can talk about the media complacency, the severe funding deficits for Republicans in our campaigns, but a lot of the time it's simply just put, people are afraid of being called a racist. In a statement to Fox received after a publication, a Minnesota Star-Tribune spokesperson pushed back on the criticism of the paper, saying the notion that the Minnesota Star-Tribune is downplaying the fraud crisis is contradicted by a Google search. The newsroom has written hundreds of articles, filed dozens of public information requests, and broken countless stories that hold state leaders accountable for this massive theft of taxpayer money. Spokesperson added that the Star-Tribune was the first to report that the Walz administration was withholding information about precisely which social service providers it had suspended, and that as far back as 2014, the Minnesota Star-Tribune broke an important story about how Minnesota had become one of the worst in the country in investigating and prosecuting Medicaid fraudsters. Okay, well, that may be true in 2014, but the issue is when 2018 rolled around and Tim Walz became the governor, that's when y'all started to just appear to just simply not talk about it. So to finish up, the Minnesota Star-Tribune has published more original and revelatory reporting about the Feeding Our Future fraud than any other media outlet in the country, including exclusive stories about state oversight failures, the statement said. All right, well, that's their claim. I don't read the Minnesota Star-Tribune on a daily basis, so maybe that's true. Maybe it's absolutely not true. All right, so from Jesse Waters, holy smokes, Trump's Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, just called Tim Walz an incompetent loser after Somalis stole $9 billion from his state. We got a quote, got another quote, and another quote, so let's just hear him say it.
First of all, regarding the situation in Minnesota, and by the way, not just Minnesota, we have Somali refugees that were dumped here by Democrats in Ohio and Massachusetts. Let me just say, we should not be shocked when you import a population whose primary occupation is pirate.
Yes. Amen.
That they're going to come here and steal everything we have. Somalia has this giant coastline, and the only industry they have created,
he couldn't possibly put that any better,
hundreds of years, is piracy.
Piracy.
Stealing what anyone going through who has actually built something has made. So yes, the pirates have stolen all of our money, and they have to go home, Jesse. That's the situation we're in right now.
Okay, well, Tampon says you guys are after him, and it's mean and it's unfair, Miller.
So he's presided over, this corrupt, incompetent loser has presided over the largest theft of American taxpayer dollars in history.
I don't know if I'd go as far as to say that. I would say Governor Gavin Newsom probably holds the title for that. How much is it with the amount of money that they have spent on homelessness in California? I think it's up to $24 billion, which amounts to over $130,000 for every single homeless individual in California. And what did the people in California get? What did the state get out of that? More homeless people. That's all they got. They got more homeless people. There's more homeless people than ever in California right now. So I would argue that the vast majority of that money was probably just fraudulently wasted with God knows what. And also that high-speed rail bullshit that they had dumped $15 billion into. How much of that money was fraudulently stolen from the taxpayers of California and the federal government? You just that's only two programs. If you put both of those together, what is that? 24, 34, almost $40 billion. Even if half of that was fraudulently just siphoned away into God knows what, that's over $20 billion, which is far surpassing Minnesota at that point.
It's never been equaled before. The amount of money that's been stolen is larger than the entire GDP of Somalia. In other words, the Somalians they brought here have thefted more than all the Somalians in Somalia have ever created for themselves in all the time that has existed up until now. So there needs to be a lot of people.
Well, to be fair, GDP is year over year, though.
Going to
At least
jail.
I think it is.
And I can promise you the Department of Justice is launching an investigation that is commensurate in force and in purpose with the scope, scale, size, and magnitude of this controversy.
Okay, so they just doubled their GDP. Thanks to Tampon. Way to go.
Basically.
So the commie boot camp. Sometimes we laugh at this. We see him doing sit-ups. Is that a concern to you, Mr. Miller?
Well, what's a concern to me is that we don't have a Democrat Party anymore. They still have the D in front of the name. They call themselves Democrats. we have a communist party, but it's actually the worst kind of communism imaginable, which is DEI communism. So it's not just we're going to redistribute your wealth, it's we're going to import massive numbers of illiterate refugees and give all your wealth to them. And we're going to give their kids the first spot in every college. And we're going to make sure their kids are the next wave of doctors who are going to butcher you when you're having a medical emergency. So we've combined the two worst ideologies imaginable. Communism and DEI is literally a recipe for national death. That is what Democrats are bringing us, Jesse.
Oh, yeah, man, that's exactly what they want. And like I've said countless times at this point, all of the roads in the Democrat Party all lead to depopulation. I think that's their ultimate agenda for all of this bullshit. Okay, Western Lensman, a manic Tim Walz declares he will fix the fraud in Minnesota, and he has presided over. Quote, you have my guarantee on this. He also attacks Trump while whining that the issue is being weaponized and sensationalized. This is what a complicit man looks and sounds like. Well, let's hear it.
Look, who's ever in charge, and I said, unlike the president, I'm the governor
now.
Dude. Whether these programs happened before we got here or afterwards, it doesn't matter. We're here now. We're the ones fixing it. You have my guarantee on this is that I certainly will have this thing fixed. And you see,
well, then bust out your fucking checkbook and write a $9 billion check to the taxpayers, both in Minnesota and
we're on the front end of it. That's how this works. And so
he ain't gonna do
would
that.
I have wanted to stop this? Would I have gone out? You know, if you think the governor goes out and checks somebody on Medicaid and that they were there, no, but that's somebody in government needed to do that. And if they didn't do that, or if there were loopholes in this, and what we found is these are poorly written and it left openings, and the goal was to get the money out. We'll fix that. But yeah, I'll take accountability for it.
We'll fix that. Let bygones be bygones. It's water under the bridge. Yeah, the money's gone, but who cares? Tomorrow's another day.
What you're seeing here is you're
spoken
seeing
like a true Democrat.
We'll continue to fix it. They're going to continue to come up with numbers that don't have it there, and it's sensationalized. I don't expect anything different from this administration.
Yep, just deflecting, as Democrats always do. Oh, I'm not going to take accountability. Oh, I'm sure it's somebody's fault. And yeah, I'm up here at the top, but I wasn't looking over the books, not me personally. So, I can't be held accountable for it, not directly. Okay, Charlie's voice rising, breaking. The pressure on Governor Tim Walz is exploding as new revelations uncover billions more in fraud. And it's not just bad optics, it's devastating. Walz actually shut down the very office that had been investigating fraud for years. Now the truth is pouring out and the backlash is massive. Calls for his resignation are getting louder by the hour. President Trump says Minnesota didn't become a fraud and money laundering magnet by accident. This is what happens when leaders fail, look the other way, and dodge accountability. Corruption at this scale doesn't just happen, it's allowed. Minnesota deserves real answers and real resignations.
It's interesting. He's made quite a few maneuvers that are questionable, I would say, over these last years. Now appointing, I should say, a fraud czar, but he closed at the statewide level an office that investigated fraud for many years. There are questions about that. This has only renewed the call for Governor Tim Walz to resign. He is currently running for a third term as governor, but this has really ramped up under his watch the last 7 years.
Infinite terms in Minnesota.
Exploding onto the national scene.
He's a dictator.
It's 5 or 6 federal investigations that have now been announced in Minnesota from SNAP or welfare fraud. The state doesn't want to give that over. Our voter rolls, Minnesota doesn't want to hand that over to the feds. Illegal immigrants having commercial driver's licenses here. In fact, President Trump saying that Walz has turned Minnesota into a fraudulent hub of money laundering activity. Those are the president's words.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't think there's any doubt in most people's minds that that's exactly what's happening. Of course, Tim Walz is not going to step down. He's not going to resign. I think he's going to just try to run for president. I'm sure that's what he's going to try to do. All right, Kristen Robbins, local media continues to cover for Tim Walz's staggering fraud. Instead of holding him accountable for $9 billion in fraud, they try to blame me for protecting whistleblowers. Unbelievable. And this is the Minnesota Star Tribune, which we recently talked about. Rep. Robbins criticized over fraud tips. It's too small to read. I'm not sure if I'd be able to get this article online, but I can certainly have a look and see. Okay, so I was able to find it, and this is it. Of course, it's paywalled because it's a leftist newspaper outlet, and they don't want most people to actually read what they're really talking about. So unable to read it. I will link it in the description if you just so happen to be subscribed to this rag, and you can read it for yourself. So anyway, I'm just guessing I'm going to have to be forced to continue, but I'll repost this. The text is really small. I mean, it can be read. And the problem is is that you can zoom in. You can't zoom in on X. See, whenever you try to zoom in, it just doesn't work because this freaking platform sucks. At least on PC it does. All right, hold on. Let me size this back up to where I had it. All right, so I'm going to do my best to read it, and let's see what I can come up with. All right, starting right here, a Republican candidate for governor is facing criticism that she withheld allegations from the state that known fraudsters were receiving reimbursements from Minnesota's Medicaid program. Rep. Kristen Robbins, R. Maple Grove, alleged on Wednesday that a defendant in the sprawling Feed Our Future scheme, which swindled money from a federal nutrition program during the COVID-19 pandemic to finance luxury purchases, has received tens of millions more in state payments through companies purportedly offering Medicaid services. Robbins said during a hearing of the House Fraud Committee, which she chairs, that she had shared the information with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Minnesota, but not the Minnesota Department of Human Services or Attorney General's office. In the committee, Robbins said she did, quote, not accept that referring things to the U.S. Attorney's Office is inappropriate, end quote. She said she was not sharing with the DHS or the Attorney General, quote, because of the trust broken with the whistleblowers, end quote, alleging retaliation against those who have spoken up. But the move is sparking outrage from Democrats who said she is withholding information that could help stop payments to fraudsters. Quote, I expect political attacks in an election year, end quote, Governor Tim Walz said in a statement Thursday. Quote, what is unacceptable is actively withholding information about fraud and blocking investigations in order to advance a political agenda. Oh my God, dude. If there is fraud, it needs to be investigated immediately, not sat on, redirected, or used for political theater. Yeah, that's some classic deflection, at least it sounds like. Minnesota's facing a sprawling fraud crisis in its Medicaid program. So far, 15 people, including 6 announced Thursday, have been charged for allegedly stealing from Medicaid-funded services meant to help vulnerable people find housing or support young people with autism. Criticism of the Walz administration's response to the problem is a primary line of attack by GOP candidates for office. Robbins, who was campaigning for governor largely on critiques of the state's fraud crisis, called the alleged situation, quote, outrageous, end quote, and said the DHS is not doing its basic due diligence. If they have, or quote, if they have not cross-checked every member of Feeding Our Future who have been indicted, or is that say indicted? Let me just do that one more time. So if they have not cross-checked every member of Feeding Our Future who have been indicted or convicted and see what other services they are getting from the state, they have failed, Robbins said, and it continues on A8. Looks like A8. So that's all I was able to read. At least I was able to get it read. I'm honestly surprised I was able to make all that out because obviously this text is extremely tiny. Would have been nice if they had, I don't know, like zoomed in on that a little better. So it could have been a little easier to at least read on screen. But that's all right. We'll just move on to the next thing. From Pete Stauber. Tim Walz has created a new industry in Minnesota, and it's costing taxpayers $9 billion and counting. Fraud tourism. Governor Tim Walz. And Charlie's voice rising from 11 hours ago. Just in, Tim Walz, Ilhan Omar, and Keith Ellison are now being directly linked to the Somali fraud network. Not loosely connected, not indirectly involved, tied straight to the operation. This wasn't random. This wasn't accidental. The same names keep coming up. The same state, the same fraud pipelines. Minnesota didn't just fail oversight. It enabled a system that was abused at massive scale. Accountability isn't optional anymore. People deserve answers. And I'll be very surprised if we actually get them, but
Ilhan Omar,
Only time
Tim Walz, Attorney General Keith Ellison. We see a web of connections between them and those directly involved in the fraud. For example, Ilhan Omar, alleged enabling introducing the 2020 Meals Act, which was ultimately subject to fraud, held a campaign victory party at the Safari restaurant.
Makes you
That's
wonder.
where one of the men who run that restaurant has associations to the convicted individuals. And then there's Tim Walz.
Of course he does.
House Oversight Investigation role in his role as governor. Or Keith Ellison, the Attorney General. His job is to enforce the law in Minnesota, but instead he's getting donations after meeting with the Feeding Our Future representatives. The Feeding Our Future, the biggest known yet part of this entire fraud. Theft ring.
Theft ring. Yeah, it clearly appears as though that they are connected. Of course, this is not ironclad evidence, or at least it may not be. I don't know. Maybe it is. All right, so Rapid Response 47. This was this afternoon, 7 hours ago at about 3 o'clock p.m. today. Vice President Vance, quote, "We believe in taking care of the poor, which is why we have Medicaid. And that's why we're outraged at the injustice of Tim Walz allowing Somalian immigrants to defraud that program to the tune of billions of dollars. It's ought to go to Americans,
and this
as it really
is the moral truth we strive to center in our work in the Trump administration and in this great movement of ours. A true Christian politics, it cannot just be about the protection of the unborn or the promotion of the family, as important as those things absolutely are. It must be at the heart of our full understanding of government. Why do we penalize corporations that ship American jobs overseas? Because we believe in the inherent dignity of human work and every person who works a good job in this country. Why? Why have we worked, without the help of Congress, to restrict H-1B visas, for example? Because we believe it is wrong for companies to bypass American labor just to go for cheaper options in the third world.
Yeah, amen. Especially just importing them into our freaking country. It's like, are you fucking kidding?
We help older Americans in retirement, including by ending taxes on Social Security, because we believe in honoring your father and mother rather than shipping all of their money off to Ukraine.
Not just Ukraine, all over the place.
We believe in taking care of the poor, which is why we have Medicaid, so that the least among us can afford their prescriptions or to take their kids to see a doctor. And it's why we are outraged at the injustice of Tim Walz allowing Somalian immigrants to defraud that program to the tune of billions of dollars. It ought to go to Americans, because that's who it's there for.
Amen, man. It's our effing money. And yeah, man, you got a standing ovation for that one. Okay, moving on to Dapper Detective from December 19th. Breaking, staggering new numbers show the Somali fraudsters have robbed the American taxpayers of $9 billion. Tim Walz allowed Black Lives Matter to burn Minneapolis and Somalis to rob America.
Now learning the Feeding Our Future case was just the tip of the iceberg for fraud in Minnesota.
Now that is according to federal prosecutors who shared staggering new numbers today.
Not sure where that is.
So Young Kim reports
maybe in Minnesota.
More than half of $18 billion spent on Medicaid programs in Minnesota could be fraudulent payments.
The U.S. Attorney's Office had warned about the iceberg of fraud they saw ahead earlier this year. Now prosecutors...
and then keep in mind that $9 billion was money that was earmarked for health care for Minnesotans, for people who they have every right to that $9 billion, and it was completely stolen. So I guess arguably $9 billion worth of health care it's not going to be had by hundreds of thousands of people in Minnesota who probably really need that health care, and they're just not going to get it because the money's not there anymore.
Leaders are giving a sense of just how big the problem could be.
What we see in Minnesota is not a handful of bad actors committing crimes.
It makes you wonder how many claims were denied because the money just wasn't there.
Scale fraud.
Federal prosecutors say they're
how many people are going to die because the money's not there?
Minnesota's social services fraud schemes. Officials say they flagged similar patterns of explosive growth in those programs. According to the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the 14 Medicaid programs at the center of investigations in Minnesota have cost $18 billion since 2018 overall. Prosecutors say they aren't able to put a final figure to the scale or portion of fraud in the state, but Assistant U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson says he suspects it could be in the ballpark of $9 billion or more.
Yeah, it's going to be more. It's probably going to be quite close to that $18 billion. I wouldn't be surprised. Got their Eaglemen. Tim Walz and Keith Ellison should resign in total disgrace. Minnesota's massive fraud scandal just hit $9 billion, the largest theft of taxpayer money in history.
So the sickening thing here is that Tim Walz and Keith Ellison, for years, they did nothing. They sat on their hands with this fraud, allowing it to grow to $9 billion. Now Minnesota's become a national embarrassment. Frankly, they should resign in disgrace. We have clients,
They're not going to. Come on.
Providers across the state in my district that aren't able to help people now because the money's drying up and there's not as many programs available that people have been relying on to take care of themselves. These vocational rehabs, adults with disabilities, who this was all really meant for.
Well, the Republicans, they're the ones that are talking about it, so it's their fault. The FBI, they're the ones that discovered it, so it's just their fault. They're the ones to blame because they're the ones that are talking about it. All right, Minnesota House Republicans on December the 20th, 2 people operated 2 different adult daycares in the same building for 4 years. Why didn't Governor Walz investigate this while the state was enrolling Medicaid providers under his leadership? And by the way, this is at the House Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Policy Committee, and this is the chairwoman. At least that's what I'm reading.
The thing about this is this person 1, is connected to person 2. And person 2 has an adult daycare. The adult daycare bubble in this chart received over $632 million in 25. But it was uncovered that person 1's adult daycare is the former location of person 2's adult daycare.
Wait a minute, they're charging over $200,000 a year for one bed, for a single bed?
So
man, that sounds a little insane.
By person 1 and person 2 were run out of the same location, both billing the state of Minnesota for 4 years. Those overlapping payments just stopped. Despite months of hearings, we continue to miss the most basic internal controls, the most basic checks and balances when we are enrolling providers.
Yeah, but we don't want to be called a racist, though. All right, Rep. Marion O'Neill Rarick from 7 hours ago. Why in the world would the Walz administration not take some kind of action when a conflict of interest statement clearly declares that a contractor or service provider was also an employee or advisor or liaison to Somalia or any foreign country? Another massive Walz failure. And she tagged in this image or this post from Minnesota staff fraud reporting at Minnesota_DHS. We are researching conflict of interest attestations for contractors and providers of DHS services. There were some interesting declarations. Some Minnesota providers note that they are advisors or liaisons to governments of foreign countries. We will let you guess which governments they are. Why is Tim Walz's government allowing foreign government advisors or liaisons to provide healthcare service to Minnesota? That is a hell of a good question. And this is from Eric Daugherty, just in. President Trump says Mike Lindell deserves to be governor of Minnesota and defeat Tim Walz in 2026. And we've got a quote from President Trump, which we'll hear right here.
And you know who's running for governor?
Oh, very quiet.
Mike Lindell. Do we like Mike Lindell? That man suffered. That man suffered. What he did, what he went through because he knew the election was rigged. And he did it. He just did it as a citizen. Mike Lindell, I'll tell you what, every time I introduced him, he got the biggest hand. I hope he does great. He deserves to do great. That man suffered.
Yeah, they dragged him into a bunch of depositions.
His company.
And a bunch of bullshit.
They did that with me too, but at least I knew what I was getting into. He was just a guy that said, geez, this election was so crooked. It was so rigged. He fought like hell.
Well, Rudy Giuliani, same thing with him. And a whole bunch of other people. General Mike Flynn, I think it was another one.
He's a great guy, too. But I'm bringing the prices down.
And Roger Stone is another one. I mean, there's a long list of names that they absolutely just unnecessarily just ruined. Okay, Mario Nalfall. Elon nails a prophetic jab at Walz and Newsom. Quote, it turns out when you take away people's money they're receiving fraudulently, they get very upset. They basically want to kill me because I'm stopping their fraud, and they want to hurt Tesla because we're stopping this terrible waste and corruption in the government. So it looks like the rest is, okay, so I guess they're bad people, and bad people will do bad things. Flash forward, Newsom, Walz, and crew are seething because they let, at the very least, fraudsters run wild. No wonder the attacks. It's personal when you're full of skeletons in your closet. And the source, Elon Musk, Fox, so on and so forth.
Countries. Right, you're working on helping the blind see and all of these other things. Is it really come down to the basic, you're aligned with President Donald Trump, who also is a friend of mine, and that you have identified well over $100 billion in waste, fraud, abuse that our federal government never should have been spending? Is that what it comes down to?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, it turns out when you take away people's, what the money they're receiving fraudulently, they get very upset, and they basically want to kill me because I'm stopping their fraud, and they want to hurt Tesla because we're stopping this terrible waste.
Well, yeah, and they're using these useful idiot progressives that are going around and smashing up Teslas, mainly over the summer, if I'm not mistaken. It wasn't longer ago than that, right? I mean, it actually was. It was like since the beginning of the year, basically since they announced that that Doge was going to be implemented and headed up by Elon Musk under the Trump administration. That's when they just started putting out all that propaganda, getting a hold of all these political pawns, these just on the ground leftists that just to go around and just start smashing up Teslas and just go absolutely psychopathic
in the government. And well, I guess they're bad people. Bad people will do bad things.
Well, I know that overall, financially in the end, yes, they can hurt you, but the people that they'll end up hurting are the people that work in your dealerships that may risk losing their job. The people that they may end up hurting are the people that work on the line and build the Teslas. They're going to be the ones hurt.
Yeah, everyday people.
And that to me is despicable on their part, just because they might have a political difference or perceived political difference.
Yeah, they don't give a shit. They just want to burn everything down. That's all they care about. All right, this comes from Elon Musk from today. Tim Walz is guilty of hiding vast fraud, and he's responding to I like Teslas. Tim Walz was one of the loudest anti-Elon voices when Elon was at Doge. Now we understand exactly why. And moving on to Scott Jensen on the Charlie Kirk Show 3 years ago, I called on Tim Walz to lead and stop the fraud. He wouldn't. And now look at the horrible, corrupted mess he's created today.
For those of you listening in the national audience that might say, oh, I don't know if a Republican can win in Minnesota, play cut 56.
Minnesota has fundamentally changed. And this is because the godfather of crime is Tim Walz, and he has been slow to act. And every time he's called on to lead, he quits. It's almost as if he's lazy. He's not doing his homework. He should have, with this $250 million fraud in terms of feeding our children, he should have gotten on it once he saw that there was a problem. But he let hundreds of millions of dollars continue to be paid to these fraudsters. And now he's trying to blame the judge. He's trying to blame the FBI. He's trying to blame the Department of Agriculture. And Minnesotans are getting tired of it.
Well, yeah, that's what Democrats do. That's what they do. They blame everybody but themselves. All right, rest in peace, Charlie. Oh, wait, this was, 3 years ago, wasn't it? Is that what it said? Yeah, look at this. 3 years ago, that's when this conversation was. So this isn't anything new. This has been going on for a long time. All right, Digital Gal, Rep. Comer snaps back at Hakeem Jeffries after Timu Obama mocked him for digging into Tim Walz's alleged fraud. Quote, everyone sees how he tries to intimidate Obama. They wonder why he's got the nickname Dollar Store Obama. He's a low IQ individual. I don't care what he calls me. He can come to Kentucky and campaign against me. I'll pay his gas bill.
That's
actually here. Hold on. Let me do this. Let me go here. Enjoy the sombrero for a hot second. All right. Here we go.
That's the third.
Oh, maybe. Let's try this again. Is he gonna let me full screen? There it goes.
He's called me a clown. Look, everyone that watches his interviews and sees how he tries to imitate Obama, they wonder why he's got the nickname Dollar Store Obama. Look, he's a low IQ individual who has to resort to name calling. That's what he criticizes Donald Trump over. I don't care what he calls me. He can come to Kentucky and campaign against me.
Yeah, but Obama had a little bit more class than that.
But at the end of the day, to defend
ghetto Obama.
Tim Walz is going to be a huge mistake for the Democrats, because everyone in Minnesota knows that this fraud has been taking place for a long time. All I'm doing is my job getting the backs of the taxpayers. If Hakeem Jeffries doesn't like it, he can go fly a kite, because at the end of the day, the American people expect their tax dollars to be spent wisely.
Yeah, Timo Obama, go fly a kite. Yeah, man, it's been at least 3 years. At least 3 years. But hell no. It's been since at least 2018. At least that's what's been revealed so far, at least in these strings of posts that I've been going through. All right, so this is from Stop Seattle Dems 2025 from December 20th. or Governor Tim Walz pick for AG. Keith Ellison, the candidate for Minnesota Attorney General and Deputy Chair of the Democratic National Committee, did this to his girlfriend. But the Democrats don't want to talk about this. So I'm going to see if this actually did, or at least try to get a little more information on this, because I'm just not knowledgeable about Keith Ellison. Honestly, don't know. I mean, you can see the picture right there. So on Grok, did Keith Ellison assault his girlfriend in 2018? It's just so weird how that number just keeps coming up. 2018. Keith Ellison, then a U.S. congressman and Democratic candidate for Minnesota Attorney General, faced allegations of domestic abuse from his ex-girlfriend, Karen Monahan. The allegations, Monahan and her son, Austin Monahan, claimed that in 2016, Ellison emotionally abused her over the course of their relationship and physically abused her in one incident. Specifically, they alleged that Ellison dragged or attempted to drag her off a bed by her legs and feet while yelling obscenities at her during an argument. Austin Monahan stated that he saw a video of this incident on his mother's computer, and Karen Monahan later said she possessed the video but did not release it publicly, citing reasons such as privacy concerns for survivors or misplacing it. She also described the relationship as involving narcissistic abuse and posted medical notes from 2017 indicating she had reported emotional and physical abuse to a doctor, naming Ellison. Through the notes mentioned no visible physical injuries requiring examination. Okay, so, all right, anyway, Ellison's response. Ellison categorically denied all the allegations of physical and emotional abuse. He stated that the alleged video did not exist because the incident never happened. He expressed continued care for Monahan's well-being. He described her relationship as having ended amicably in 2016. The Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party hired an independent attorney to investigate the claims of physical abuse. Investigation concluded in October 2018 that the allegations could not be substantiated, primarily because Monahan declined to provide the alleged video or other corroborating evidence beyond her account and the medical notes. Critics, including Republicans and some on the left, questioned the investigation's impartiality due to the law firm's ties to Democrats. Anyway, it goes on. Sounds like that's a fake image. Probably a fake image. So I would take that with a mega grain of salt. It just came up with this whole fraud, Tim Walz, and they're saying that this is Governor Tim Walz's pick for Attorney General. So I figured I'd throw that in there, but I'm not exactly buying the image. But maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Let me see. Let's take a look at a few of these sources. So New York Times, CBS News. I mean, yeah, they might all be covering for him. They all very well could be. But her getting dragged off the bed, I mean, that's a little more than just dragging someone off the bed, if you know what I mean. So, but anyway, all right, Paul A. Zipula, I can't even pronounce that dude's name. Democrats are outraged. Oh, okay, so that's it for the whole Tim Walz thing. That's the last post that I have. So I'm going to get into other matters, but that's all the information that I came across over the last couple of days, which is quite a lot of information, and I'm sure it's just going to keep ramping up as time goes on. So I will keep my eyes peeled for any further information that comes out on this alleged fraud, which sounds like it's going to go way over $9 billion. So, I mean, we've been talking $1 billion for the last several weeks. $1 billion from Minnesota. Now it's suddenly overnight multiplied by 9-fold. All right, so again, Paul A. Zizpula from 3 hours ago. Democrats are outraged as 60 Minutes has delayed their report on Inside CECOT. Do you spell the acronym or do you say like CSOT? I don't know. So here's a trailer for that report that'll now air at a future date. You know what Democrats aren't outraged about? American victims of illegals. It says it all, sadly. And yeah, that's the absolute triple truth.
It began as soon as the planes landed. The deportees thought they were headed from the U.S. back to Venezuela, but instead they were shackled, paraded in front of cameras, and delivered to CECOT.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you
the notorious maximum
commit felonies inside the United States.
El Salvador.
As an illegal.
60 Minutes, they endured 4 months of hell.
Yeah, they don't fuck around in that prison, I'm sure.
We thought we were already the living dead, honestly.
It began as soon as the...
so that's that. I'm sure they're going to try to paint it in a way that it appears that it's all controlled by the U.S. government. It's the Trump administration that's putting them through all these atrocities, all of this horrific torture, when in reality, this facility, CECOT, it's in no way controlled by the federal government, not by the American federal government at all. Like there's no government entity, no individual that has any oversight, any authority over this facility. It's completely controlled by the government of El Salvador, and that's that. And just to dig into that just a little bit, is the CCOT in El Salvador run by the U.S. government? No, the Centro de Confinamiento del Terrorismo, or Terrorism Confinement Center in El Salvador, is not run by the U.S. government. It is a maximum security prison owned, built, and operated by the Salvadorian government under President Nayib Bukele. Key facts on ownership and operation. Construction began in 2022 and opened in 23 as part of Bukele's anti-gang crackdown. It is staffed by Salvadorian guards, police, and military personnel. The facility holds primarily Salvadorian inmates arrested under the country's state of exception, with a capacity of up to 40,000. The U.S. involvement in 2025, the U.S. government under President Trump entered into a bilateral agreement with El Salvador to deport hundreds of alleged gang members, mostly Venezuelans, accused of ties to Tren de Aragua, plus some MS-13 members, which MS-13, they're from El Salvador, directly to CSOT or CCOT. The U.S. paid El Salvador approximately $4.7 to $6 million to detain these individuals for a 1-year period, which is renewable, probably will be renewed, essentially outsourcing their incarceration. Some reports and statements from Salvadorian officials to the UN described this as effectively leasing space in CECOT, with the U.S. retaining influence over the detainees' fate, e.g. in a later prisoner swap. Human rights groups criticize this as making the U.S. complicit in abuses, but daily operations, security, and administration remain under Salvadorian control. So the mainstream news, the advocates, the critics, they can say whatever they want. The U.S. government, they're not in any control over this facility. It's run by El Salvador. Criticisms and context, accusations of torture and indefinite detention, so on and so forth. I mean, it basically just sounds like Gitmo, really. I mean, I'm sure that there's been a lot of criticisms over Guantanamo Bay, although I'm sure that Democrats aren't fully against it. And if they are today, I'm sure that that's not always been the case. I'm sure Democrats probably championed Gitmo at some point. Wouldn't surprise me. Okay, so moving on to Right Angle News Network. Oh, wait, no, hold on. Let me see if I have anything else. Oh, yeah, that's right. I have this tab. So 60 Minutes, I just searched 60 Minutes on the X platform and came up with at least this from Jay Stewart 3 hours ago. Another disaster under Barry Weiss's reign at CBS News. Just hours before airtime on December 21st, 2025, 60 Minutes abruptly pulled its heavily promoted segment Inside CECOT, featuring interviews with Venezuelan migrants deported by the Trump administration to El Salvador's brutal mega prison, where they described torture-like conditions. CBS posted an editor's note saying the lineup was updated and the report needs additional reporting, but sources call this move unprecedented for a finished promoted piece. Critics are torching the decision as censorship, with many pointing directly to Weiss, appointed editor-in-chief in October of 2025 amid Paramount's acquisition of her Free Press. Her short tenure has already sparked fears of softer coverage on the Trump administration. Why delete the teaser and bury a story exposing controversial deportations? The legacy of 60 Minutes takes another hit. Watch the now deleted trailer below, which we already saw that. So anyway, that was said. Not anyone substantial. I think they're just an everyday user on X. So I just came across that. 15K followers. Yeah, they're not connected to any, like government agency or anything like that. Brian Allen, breaking: CBS just pulled its own 60 Minutes report exposing torture at El Salvador's CECOT prison, a facility where Venezuelans were secretly sent instead of deported. Well, it wasn't a secret, dude. I mean, we all know that they're being sent there. Hence the 60 Minutes report. Ed Krasenstein, yeah, we all love this asshole. So breaking: CBS just pulled this episode of 60 Minutes claiming it is postponed. Here's the trailer that was pulled for the now postponed segment. Make sure everyone sees it. It's remarkable how much harm pro-Trump Barry Weiss has managed to inflict on CBS News in such a short time. Oh man, they pissed off about this. They are not happy. Okay, so moving on to another topic. Right Angle News Network, 13 hours. Breaking: a leftist jury in Los Angeles has acquitted Bobby Nunez, a South LA tow truck driver who in November towed away an ICE vehicle from an active investigation. That sounds like a bit you would see on, I don't even know what, like Comedy Central or some shit. You can steal federal officials' vehicles in California and get away with it now. Incredible. So we got 13 seconds worth of a video of him getting arrested after he was towing ICE vehicles. I gotta admit, that's kind of funny. He just like hitched up an ICE vehicle and just took off with it. The berries and cherries still flashing on the vehicle. It's like, dude, what the fuck? All right, Hunter Ash. If juries convict or acquit based on political or tribalistic allegiance, our justice system is gone. I don't know how we solve this within the current framework. So many judges are corrupt too, and there are few, if any, checks and balances to ensure they actually apply the law. Yeah, I don't even know, man. I mean, you have to be convicted or acquitted by a jury of your peers, and if you've got, whether if it's the prosecutor or, well, most likely the defendant who gets enough members of the jury up there who are essentially politically active or activists, rather, they very well just could be the deciding factor, especially in instances of requiring a unanimous decision by a jury. So I don't know, man. That's just the way our system is. If you get a bunch of left wingers that are a bunch of activists, and if whatever they're put on trial for, if it fits their ideology, then they're going to end up acquitting them, most likely. All right, Right Angle News Network. Okay, I think we already got that one. Yeah, already got that. So anyway, Stephen Miller, another example of blatant jury nullification in a blue city. The justice system depends on a jury of peers with a shared system of interests and values. Mass migration tribalizes the entire legal system. Well, that's a major problem. A lot of people in LA, they do have a shared system of interests and values, and a lot of it surrounds, I don't know, freaking communism, socialism, Marxism, burning the whole system down. Again, a bunch of useful idiots. Okay, so this comes from HealthBot. RFK Jr., he explains how Bill Gates had the foresight to buy over 1 million shares in BioNTech stock before COVID happened. BioNTech, before COVID happened. Quote, the same week, Bill Gates, who was overseeing the Event 201 simulation, bought 1.1 million shares of BioNTech vaccine, which later became the Pfizer vaccine. He then sold almost all of that stock just 2 years later, how convenient, at a $242 million profit, and a week after that he announced the vaccine didn't work. That's what you call a pump and dump scheme. Sounds like it, doesn't it?
The last one of these was in 2020 or 2019 October. And it was hosted by Bill Gates, by Fauci, and by April Hayes. And interestingly, by George Gale, who is the head of the Chinese CDC in New York City. And I'm sure a lot of you have gone and looked at this on YouTube. It's called Event 201. And the fourth simulation that day, the last one, is all about how you use the pandemic as a pretense for clamping down totalitarian abridgments of freedom of speech, and particularly, how do you stop people from talking about a lab leak as the source of these viruses? Now, this in October 2019, none of us at that time had ever heard of COVID. We now know that COVID was almost certainly circulating by mid-September. On September 12th,
yeah, it was. That's why they called it COVID-19. The 19 stands for 2019.
The Chinese government kicked down the door of the Wuhan lab, brought in General Wei, which is a bioweapons expert from the People's Army, to run the lab and remove all the gain of function studies from their public-facing websites and all the genomic sequences from all the viruses.
No doubt at all they did that.
Clearly knew that the virus was circulating in September.
Yeah, and also remember when they were like, it came from a wet market. It came from a wet market from bats. Yeah, that's it, from bats. And the bats that had the coronavirus in it came from like 200 miles away. It totally didn't come from the facility that has a coronavirus right on the fucking building.
Later you have this. That same week, Bill Gates, who was overseeing this simulation, made a 1.1 million shares of BioNTech vaccine, which later became the Pfizer vaccine. He then sold that, almost all that stock, 87%, 2 years later, at a $242 million profit. And a week after that, he publicly announced the vaccine didn't work.
That's so fucked up.
Pump and dump scheme.
Yeah.
He was the guy who was
You think he's going to get prosecuted for that? He should.
Who took $52 million from Gates for his instance. Gates made his.
Well, wait a minute. After he sold that 87% of those shares, what about everybody else who was currently holding those shares? Like, he didn't give a flying shit about them because he came out a week later and said, yeah, well, that vaccine doesn't work. I can only imagine what the hell the stock did after he made that announcement.
So you had the period then pumping up the stock for 2 years and then dumping it a week before he goes on TV and says, oh, it didn't work.
Yeah, and who did he sell it to? That's another question. I mean, who was left holding that bag? That is absolutely ridiculous, man. Okay, so jumping back over to Grok just one more time, just asking this question. Did Bill Gates buy 1.1 million shares of BioNTech vaccine, then sell most of his shares, then publicly stated the vaccine produced by BioNTech didn't work? According to Grok, it says partially true but misleading. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, not Bill Gates personally, invested $55 million in BioNTech in September of 2019, pre-pandemic. Yeah, it could be pre-pandemic, but dude, September 2019, just by a sheer coincidence, just happened to be the time when COVID was discovered and had already, like in China, it had already been discovered in China and already began spreading to other people in September of 2019. So anyway, it says pre-pandemic for HIV TB programs, acquiring approximately 1.04 million shares, close to 1.1 million, at $18.10 each. In quarter 3, 2021, the foundation sold about 86% of its holdings, reducing from 1.04 million to just 149,000 shares, profiting hundreds of millions as shares peaked. Gates later, 2021 to 23 interviews, criticized mRNA COVID vaccines for not fully blocking infection transmission after having short duration and losing efficacy against variants, stating they help prevent severe disease, but we need a new way of doing vaccines. He did not say the BioNTech Pfizer vaccine didn't work overall. He acknowledged it protects health, but falls short on transmission blocking, a known limitation confirmed by fact checks from Reuters and PolitiFact. The investment was philanthropic, timed pre-COVID, not a personal pump and dump. Yeah, all right, whatever. I don't entirely buy what he's saying right here. I would lean toward what Secretary Kennedy's saying is probably more legit than not. Because, yeah, I mean, this tracks pretty closely along with what he was saying. So, but anyway, let's move on to the next thing. Anti-woke memes. Okay, I wanted to share this last, but I just didn't order it properly, so I'm just going to play it now. Is feminism gay or retarded? And if you haven't seen this yet, this is absolutely hilarious, and it's just something perfect to play for perhaps, you know, your family members on Christmas who are whether if they're progressive or conservative. It kind of works on both sides. So let's check this out.
And that's why I genuinely,
hilarious.
as a feminist man, I think that toxic masculinity is so destructive for our culture.
Cheers to that.
Right?
I wish all men were feminists like you.
Me too.
It's so refreshing.
All right, here's that check for you, sir. Sir? First of all, do not assume my pronouns. Second of all, how dare you assume that because I'm a man that I'm going to be paying for this whole dinner? Women are fully capable of paying for themselves.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want me to split the bill between you two then?
Actually, why don't we do this so we can really drive this point home for you, because you're giving me very misogynistic vibes right now. Leave the entire bill, and she will pay for the entire thing because she is a strong, independent woman who does not need a man to provide for her. As a feminist woman, wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
She's got the right hair color.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, in that case, here's the check, ma'am. I'm sorry. Okay.
Canceled.
Canceled.
He's
got a Black Lives Matter
toxic
shirt on.
that guy was.
Right. So toxic. Oh my God, this is expensive.
Oh, you got it.
Give me a purse, bitch! Give me a purse! Hey, are you gonna help me?
Absolutely not. As a feminist man, I don't want to imply that you can't defend yourself just because you're a woman.
Are you serious right now?
Yeah, what? Yeah, there's no difference between a man and a woman physically. Gender's just a cultural and societal construct. You're just as capable of defending yourself as a man is.
Thanks, pussy!
As a feminist woman, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I guess, but can you at least do something like call the police? He's literally getting away with my purse.
The police. We need to defund those racist pieces of shit.
Hey, bitch. Long time no call.
Johnny Suckett, what are you doing outside of West Hollywood?
I make my rounds.
Long time no cock? Who is this?
Let's just say your little boy toy here and I used to have some wild nights down in West Hollywood. You know Boys Town?
No, I don't know.
Sucks for you. Sucks for me. Perhaps I'll see you there tonight, bitch?
Oh!
What was that? Are you gay?
As a feminist man, I'm sexually fluid, so I don't believe that men need to conform to being heterosexual, even within a relationship. As a feminist woman, wouldn't you agree with that?
All right.
Oh my God.
This. I'm dating a conservative.
Oh, I like this look. Johnny, wait up! Start across the restaurant. Give me that car, bitch. Let's go to Flaming Saddles.
All right. That was hilarious. I just randomly came across that earlier today. So I felt like I just had to share that. That was funny. All right. You know what? I'll just repost that in case you want to see it on your own time. Okay. All right. Anyway, this week, 13 hours ago, a recent Quinnipiac poll puts congressional Democrats at an 18% approval rating among registered voters. Rep. Hakeem Jeffries reacts, quote, the most significant indicator of public sentiment is, are you winning elections or are you losing elections? So basically, he's like, I don't give a shit. We're just working overtime to seize power. That's all we want. We just want power. Fuck the percentages. We don't give a shit. So let's hear what Timu Obama has to say.
On the question of rising prices and the stewardship of the economy, clearly the public is saying they're not satisfied with Donald Trump. They don't approve of him. But actually, the Democrats in recent polls are actually faring worse than the Republicans. Take a look at a Quinnipiac poll out just this week. Shows that Democrats have their lowest approval rating in the poll's 15-year history. Only 18% give Democrats a high approval rating in the handling of the economy. Only 18%, 73% disapproval. What are you doing wrong?
Well, clearly that's an outlier poll. Listen, the most significant indicator of public sentiment is, are you winning elections or are you losing elections? And on that front, Democrats have been winning elections since January, a special election in Iowa where we flipped the seat that Donald Trump had just won by 21 points. Of course, winning the Wisconsin State Supreme Court race in April, a swing state, a state that Donald Trump had just won. The Democratic candidate wins by 11. Flipped the mayorship in Omaha for the first time.
Well, then how the fuck do you explain an 18% approval, you
in 12
idiot?
years. And then, of course, last month, during the off-year elections, winning decisively in Virginia, in New Jersey, in New York, in Mississippi.
Yeah, very blue, very blue, very blue. All those are very blue districts, dude.
In Georgia,
none of that was of any
Pennsylvania,
surprise.
Prop 50 in California, and then most recently, 2 weeks ago,
very blue,
flipping the mayorship in Miami
a lot of propaganda
for the first time
in California.
in nearly 30 years. And Eileen Higgins will be the first woman mayor of Miami.
Oh, here we go with the identity
These
politics.
These results aren't
She's the first
ambiguous. They're not unclear. They are unequivocal that the American people are rejecting Republican extremism and embracing our affordability agenda.
All right, Leader
And again,
Hakeem.
how do you explain the 18% approval then, you fucking retard? Here's another one. Western Lensman Karl polling shows Democrats' approval rating at 18%. What are you doing wrong? Jeffries, that is an outlier poll. Probably looks like it's going to be in the same conversation.
But Leader Jeffries, on the question of rising prices and the stewardship of the economy, clearly the public is saying they're not satisfied with Donald Trump. They don't approve of him. But actually, the Democrats in recent polls are actually faring worse than the Republicans. Take a look at a Quinnipiac poll out just this week. Shows that Democrats have their lowest approval rating in the poll's 15-year history. Only 18% give Democrats a high approval rating in the handling of the economy. Only 18%, 73% disapproval. What are you doing wrong?
Well, clearly that's an outlier poll.
Okay, I had to hear it again. That was hilarious. All right, Scott Jennings, the Dem Party is sitting at an 18% approval rating. 18%! The only support they seem to have is from friends, family, illegals, and health insurance executives. They desperately need this autopsy. Autopsy, wow.
The Democratic Party, Kate, did an autopsy on why they lost in 2024. They're not going to release it
they're not listening
to the public.
They don't give a shit.
How is this not
all about brainwashing? We got to brainwash everybody.
Of all of the reasons why the public doesn't trust the Democratic Party, thinks that they are.
This is laughable. So why put Democrats in a barrel?
Which, by the way, like Hakeem Jeffries, like, you know, he was bragging about Democrats winning this, Democrats winning that. I mean, just off the top of my head, there was one that they didn't win. They didn't win Memphis, Tennessee, or not. Was it Memphis or was it Nashville? No, it was Nashville. What's her name? Like a crazy ass lady, the brain dead leftist who was just this like ridiculous political activist that would like barged into the governor's office on one occasion and had to be physically dragged out of there. And she threw a kicking, screaming temper tantrum. She was running for Congress and she lost. She actually lost not by a whole lot, but she still lost by damn near double digits.
Because the facts are Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the
18% of Americans approve of Democrats in Congress.
Listen, Republicans control the House,
So
we're an equal opportunity, by the way.
It's like,
television shows.
You guys are down to
Okay. Yes.
I'm confused with what's going on here.
You guys are down to friends, family, illegals, and health insurance executives. That's who you got
Amen.
right now. You need an autopsy.
Amen. Yep, that's about it. And then he was just going to go into the same just brain dead talking points. Well, the Republicans control the House. They control the Senate. So what does that have to do with your 18% disapproval rating? It's among Democrats, dude. It's not among Congress as a whole. It's among the Democratic Party. Freaking idiot. But of course, he was trying to spin it, trying to gaslight you. The Democratic Party is sitting at 18% approval rating. 18%. I already saw that. All right, so moving on to, this might be one of the last things that I'm bringing up. So Laura Loomer, as I've been saying, President Trump is the most pro-animal president in U.S. history. Thank you, President Trump. I wish people spoke about this more. You could tell a lot about a person based off how they treat animals. Trump equals savior of animals. And this comes from Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary. Trump administration launches multi-agency strike force to crack down on animal abuse. And once again, this is going to be found on Fox News. Trump administration launches multi-agency strike force to crack down on animal abuse. Bondi says prosecutors will be placed in every state to handle animal cruelty cases. And animal testing, that's a long interview. That's 10 minutes. But this article is going to be linked in the description if you want to watch that. Senior officials in President Donald Trump's administration say they are cracking down on animal cruelty, rolling out coordinated actions across the Justice Department, the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Health and Human Services to target dogfighting and puppy mills and animal testing. Quote, we are forming a strike force, and we're going to have designated U.S. attorneys in every state to prosecute these animal abuse cases, said AG Pam Bondi on My View with Laura Trump on Saturday. Bondi appeared with Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins and Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to discuss their interagency animal welfare initiative. Bondi says her department would work with the USDA to conduct special training for prosecutors and law enforcement agents on executing search warrants in animal abuse cases. We just last week convicted someone for the first time ever of using a firearm in a violent crime, and the violent crime was dogfighting, Bondi said. In another example that shows no one is above the law, Bondi told host Laura Trump that 190 dogs were seized from former NFL player LaShawn Johnson. Another NFL player with dogfighting. I mean, that's kind of giving some Michael Vick vibes. That was the most seized from one single defendant. So we're coming after you if you're going after these babies, she said, holding a small black puppy named Guru in her lap. There's an image, dog getting rescued. Rollins said the USDA is taking a tougher approach to shutting down abusive puppy mills, moving away from issuing warnings and toward stricter enforcement of the Animal Welfare Act. Quote, compliance with the Animal Welfare Act, which is from the 1960s, was hovering around 65 to 67% until the last few years. We're now closer to 92%, but it's that 8% that we're really going to focus on. She described the poor conditions dogs can face in these mass breeding operations. No more puppy mills where you have puppies stacked on top of each other, where if you don't sell them, then you drown them in a barrel because it's the cheapest way to do it. Why don't you just give them away for free? These fucking evil assholes. All right, Kennedy said all the major sub-agency heads at HHS are all deeply committed to ending animal experimentation. He said new studies on animal testing show that the predictivity of animal models is very, very poor for human health outcomes. There are much more efficient ways of predicting human health outcomes. We're using, even in their nascent stages, computational modeling and AI, which he said provides much better results. The HHS chief said there are about 10,000 primates in research labs, or 100,000, not 10,000, 100,000 primates in research labs across the country. There are another 20,000 that are imported every year, and we're very concerned about that. We're trying to put an end to that completely, he said, adding that his department was re-educating researchers to improve the predictability of human health outcomes. I don't really like that phrase too much. That's a phrase that the left loves to use. No, we just have to re-educate you. In other words, we got to brainwash you into believing what we want you to believe. I just don't get what's up with just using like the mice and the rats. I thought rats, their systems were a lot more similar to like humans as far as the medical experimentation. I mean, I'm assuming that it's not including rats and mice, but I don't know. All right. Anyway, in September, the National Institutes of Health, NIH, changed its rules to ensure funding could be used to retire their primates to sanctuaries after the experimentation is done. Where's that island? Is it off South Carolina coast, or maybe it's the North Carolina coast? Isn't there like this island that's just full of primates where they just set them free after they've been experimented on or something like that? I saw something, I think it was here on YouTube. I saw something about that where there's like this island that's just full of like apes, monkeys that are like former test monkeys at research facilities or something like that. Anyway, until now, there was no option like that, no alternative except the researcher euthanized that animal after they were through. Now we're developing sanctuaries across the country, he said. Kennedy framed animal welfare as a measure of the country's character. The badge of a really humane nation is the way that it takes care of its animals, he said. And I think he's absolutely correct. Absolutely right on that. Okay, so I think I might have something else related to this, but maybe not. Okay, no, this is different. So it's not the government's job to decide what I can or cannot handle. And that's from Tim Burchett, who is the congressman representing Tennessee's District 2. And he reposts this from Tommy Lauren from 11 hours ago. We are ready for the truth about aliens. Let's see what this is all about.
Tommy, what do you think? I'm all over this. I watched The Age of Disclosure, which is a Prime Video documentary, I think probably setting up this Spielberg movie, which I think looks fantastic, by the way, for a lot of reasons. But I'm all in on this. My husband hates it. He doesn't like the thought of there being something else out there. But if you watch The Age of Disclosure and you watch some of these whistleblowers and what they're talking about, I just don't believe with these crash sites, with this group inside the CIA that's like, I guess we would refer to it as the deep state, that has all these mysteries and they've had for decades, and they're very, very cloak and dagger, and it's not transparent at all, even less transparent than the Epstein files, right, if you look at the redactions there. So I'm all in on this, and I think that the point that a lot of folks are making is we can't handle the truth, right? Another famous movie. That if people were to believe or they were to know the truth about other life form, that they would be so freaked out that it would lead to mass panic and chaos. But I think we're there. We're ready for the age of disclosure. With everything crazy going on, men being women, furries, all this stuff, we can handle the aliens. Bring it on.
We love the aliens. E.T. was the first movie I saw in the theaters. That's a Spielberg movie, and it taught me that you can love the alien, but not trust the government. But Joe, you have a personal Spielberg feelings as well.
Yeah, well, I do. That's an off-camera story a little bit. I might have snuck into his private area there at the Universal lot. But, you know, I was thinking about this. Like, if we're going to take a Spielberg alien movie and say, hey, that's the truth, maybe we look at some of the ones he's already done. I mean, E.T. is a wonderful movie. Super 8 was a great movie. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Batteries Not Included, I think, is an amazing movie. He conceptualized that one. But the one that really stands out is Cowboys and Aliens. Like, if that becomes real, then if he's going to be prophesying the truth with his alien movies, of which there are many, I think Cowboys and Aliens is where it's going to be. I really do, Tommy. I mean, I think we can take them, number one, and we can do it with a break action and a 6-shooter.
Well, I think it depends on what kind of aliens we're talking about. Because E.T. is very friendly, and if that's what the aliens are, then great. But if the aliens are different kinds of aliens, then it might not go so well. And I generally avoid topics like this, unlike, for example, Tommy or our colleague Brett Baer, who loves these stories. I generally tune out from them, and I think it comes back to this time of year, 8th grade. We were done with our classwork, and our science teacher in 8th grade had us watch the movie Aliens, the sequel to Alien, in class. And it absolutely terrified me. And I had to pretend not to be scared because I was an 8th grade boy, but I was scared. And so I think generally aliens, I just shut my brain down to all of these stories based on that triggering event.
Okay, all right. Well, you know, just a personal opinion of mine. I don't think that aliens are visiting the planet or the Earth. I just don't think it's happening. I've been an astronomy buff since I was old enough to read. And space, it's gargantuan. It's too vast. Physical beings cannot travel the speed of light. And even if we could, it would take 100,000 years just to cross the galaxy. And it would take 2.5 million years just to get to our next door neighbor galaxy. And there's over 4 to 5 septillion galaxies out there. So there's plenty of stars, plenty of galaxies. There's more stars than there are grains of sand across the Earth. Like on all the beaches and all the sand dunes and all the deserts, all combined, there's more stars out there than grains of sand on the Earth. So without any doubt, I'm sure alien life exists all over the universe, but the universe, it hasn't existed long enough for life to advance to the point where interstellar or even intergalactic travel is remotely feasible. But like look, the universe, it's extremely young. It's very young. It's like 13.72 billion years old, maybe 14 billion. I think a few scientists were rolling around the idea that it might be 16 or 17 billion years old. I mean, even if you estimate it up to 20 billion years, it's still extraordinarily young in the grand scheme of things. Like if you took the entire lifetime of the universe, at least theoretically, as long as we believe that the universe is going to last for, and by that, I mean, how long stars are going to exist. How long is it going to be until the very last star burns out in the entire universe? Well, scientists estimate that it could be 100 trillion years by the time the very last star burns out and no new stars will develop. And the universe will just exist in darkness forever. So if that occurring 100 trillion years from now, where we are right now, 13.72 billion years after the universe, after the Big Bang happened, and here we are, from the time that we are now, from the time that the universe was born to the time that the last star is going to burn out, let's say that that's a 100-year human lifetime. From the time that the universe was born, the Big Bang, up until the last star burns out. Let's say that's a 100-year human lifetime. So where are we today in that time scale of the universe's lifetime? We would be 10 minutes old. That's how old the universe would be if it were to live to a 100-year lifetime. It would be only 10 minutes old right now. So universe, it's still a baby. It's still a baby in its first day. It hasn't even experienced its first hour of its first day yet. That's how young the universe is right now. So are aliens out there? Sure. Yeah, sure. Aliens are out there. And most likely there's beings out there that may be a lot more advanced than humans, possibly. I wouldn't dispute that either. I mean, it seems reasonable that there may be an Earth-like planet that formed 2-3 billion years before the Earth did. So in other words, whatever intelligent life that exists on that planet, they got a 2 to 3 billion year head start from humans. So they could be 2 to 3 billion years more advanced. Well, maybe that would be plenty of time for them to get enough technological development to the point where they might be able to travel interstellar or whatnot. I don't know, man. I just don't buy it. I think if they had that level of technology, and if Earth was such a precious planet, and if our resources were that needed, I don't think that they would just be trying to play shell games and playing hide and seek with the public. I think that they, if they wanted the Earth, they could just friggin' take it. If they've got the technology to get here, and with the vastness of the universe and with space, I just don't get why they just keep playing hide and seek with everyone. Plus, like all the resources we have on the Earth are abundant all over the universe. I mean, water is one of the most abundant elements in the universe. It's made of hydrogen, which is the most abundant element in the universe, and it's also made with oxygen, which is like the third or the fourth most abundant element in the universe. So there's no shortage of water anywhere. Water is literally all over the place. So, and plus, why come to the Earth and try to harvest water when they could just land on one of the moons around Jupiter or Saturn? There's Enceladus. It's spewing out water right now in the form of geysers, and it's going around Saturn right now. They could just land on Enceladus and just harvest all the water from there if that's what they need. Or, I've heard gold. I'm sure gold is probably, all over the universe as well. Our precious metals, rare metals, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. But yeah, I don't really buy it. I'll believe it. I'll just believe it when I see it. If aliens land on the White House lawn, then fine. You got a believer out of me. So, but anyway, that'll be it for this video. And if you enjoyed the video, please give the video a quick like and consider subscribing to the channel. It'll mean a lot to me if you subscribe. And I will be dropping a new episode of The Swamp tomorrow on Monday. Usually post by 11 p.m. Eastern at the latest. And that's the time that I usually shoot for. And I cover The Swamp Monday through Friday on this channel. So I hope to see you here tomorrow when I drop the next episode of The Swamp. And thank you so much for watching. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you have a great rest of your night and a great Monday. And God bless America.